So there I am, phone pressed to my ear. Briefing state prosecutors about government corruption, when out of nowhere, an HOA president and her teenage son march up my driveway demanding. I hand over the keys to my Harley for the so-called good of the community. The smell of motor oil and fresh coffee filled my garage, while morning dew glistened on $25,000 worth of restored heritage softail. I'm mid-sentence with the state attorney's office explaining municipal bid rigging when this kid who's already failed his driver's test twice points at my bike and says, "My mom thinks you should let me borrow this for prom." His mom nods, as if this wild idea makes perfect sense. It's community service, Mr. Mason. Sharing is caring. First, I thought it had to be a joke. But then, she actually calls 911 on me while I'm literally on the phone with prosecutors. What would you do if some entitled HOA president interrupted your call with law enforcement, trying to take your motorcycle? I'd drop a comment with where you're watching from, and let me know if your neighborhood has ever seen this level of crazy. But before I get deeper into this mess, let me back up. My name's Jack Mason, but everyone calls me Tank. I spent 20 years in the Marines mostly. As a diesel mechanic, fixing everything from Humvees to generators in places where warranties meant nothing. After my divorce, I bought a modest ranch house in Willowbrook Estates, hoping for peace and a fresh start. The Harley, that was my dad's, Vietnam vet, Purple Heart recipient. He passed from cancer 3 years ago, but left me this 1996 Heritage. Soft tail and boxes of original parts. Well, I spent 3 years rebuilding it, new paint, a rebuilt engine, a custom leather seat. When she fires up, that deep rumble isn't just sound, it's freedom. Willowbrook Estates looked perfect at first glance. Middle-class subdivision, artificial lake, walking trails, speed bumps every 200 yards, manicured lawns, matching mailboxes. But what the brochures don't tell you? An HOA that charges $180 a month just to control your life? Enter Victoria Lane. Connie to her friends. Though I doubt that list is long. She's been HOA president for 4 straight years, never challenged. Real estate agent, bleached blonde bob, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, driving a white BMW with vanity plates. Every email she sends looks polite, but somehow makes you feel like dirt. She likes to say, the rules apply differently to quality residents. Her words, not mine. She runs the architectural review committee like a dictatorship. Has an alta-cozy connection with Jim Kratzky, the local code enforcement officer. More on him later. My first run-in with Connie came 3 weeks after moving in. I got a certified letter saying my Harley violated commercial vehicle restrictions under Bylaw 7.3b. Apparently, my motorcycle was being treated the same as if I were running a business out of my garage. Meanwhile, my neighbor's plumbing van sat in his driveway 24/7. The landscaper across the street had a trailer full of mowers parked out front. And Connie's own BMW was plastered with real estate magnets every weekend. I sent a polite email with photos asking for equal enforcement. The response? An emergency board meeting, a second violation notice, and a $150 fine. The irony was almost funny almost. Then there's Tyler, Connie's 14-year-old son. Let's just say his driving record speaks for itself. Failed tests, wrecked cars, property damage. And yet, somehow he thinks he's ready for a Harley. He's been eyeing my bike since the day I moved in. The first time he approached me, I was washing it in my driveway. He strolled over and casually asked if I'd loan it to him for prom night. I explained insurance liability and even offered to show him how the engine worked. He walked off muttering about selfish veterans and problem neighbors. That was on a Friday. By Monday, I had 4 violation notices in my mailbox. The pattern was starting to show itself. But I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole really went. Tore, how relevant my calls with the state attorney would soon become. 2 weeks later, Connie escalated into what I can only describe as a selective enforcement campaign that could make a bureaucrat proud. Suddenly, every tiny thing I did became a violation. Grass supposedly a 1/4 inch too tall, even though it was within limits. Garbage cans visible from the street for 3 hours, even though everyone else has sat out all day. Noise complaints. for changing my oil on a Friday afternoon. Each violation carried another $150 fine. Meanwhile, neighbors with the exact same issues got a free pass. That's when I met Sarah Blake, my next-door neighbor. Single mom, night shift nurse, raising twins. She was the first person to tell me I wasn't crazy. She'd seen the same pattern canny, targeting families until they gave up and moved. Sarah told me about other neighbors who'd been pushed out the same way. Meanwhile, Connie's son Tyler was throwing loud parties, leaving trash on walking trails, even denting garage doors with zero fines, zero consequences. I decided it was time to fight back. I started documenting everything, researching HOA records, reviewing meeting minutes, connecting dots. And what I uncovered made my blood boil. This wasn't just petty HOA politics. It was a system of favoritism, selective enforcement, and financial gain. And as I dug deeper, I realized something. Connie wasn't just abusing power, she was profiting from it. This wasn't just petty harassment anymore. This was a calculated real estate scheme. And while that unfolded, Tyler's obsession with my motorcycle kept escalating. One afternoon, he showed up with 3 of his buddies, clearly trying to use peer pressure. He claimed other cool neighbors let kids borrow their vehicles all the time. When I explained again that insurance laws and liability make that impossible, he exploded into a full teenage tantrum right there in my driveway. Hoarding something that should benefit the whole community, he shouted, loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. Then he added, "My mom says people like you are what's wrong with America." My grip tightened around the wrench I was holding, the grease from the chain making it slip in my hand. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just teenage entitlement. Tyler was repeating his mother's words almost word for word. This harassment was deliberate, coordinated. As Tyler stormed off with his little crew, I made a decision. Enough was enough. Time to stop playing defense and start gathering evidence. Real evidence. The kind that holds up in court and destroys corruption at its roots. Because if there's one thing 20 years in the Marines taught me, it's this: bullies only understand one language: overwhelming force, applied at the right moment. 3 days later, things escalated again. I was in my garage changing the oil on my truck when a city vehicle pulled into my driveway. Out steps Jim Kratzky, our local code enforcement officer, clipboard in hand, reeking of cheap cologne thick enough to choke on, acting like he owned the place. Got an anonymous complaint about a home-based business, he announced flatly. Need to inspect your property. Anonymous complaint? Right. The timing was as subtle as a brick through a window. He started poking around my garage like he was searching for buried treasure. He's desperate to find some technical violation he could write up. The smell of motor oil mixing with his bargain bin. Aftershave made the air unbearable. Here's where my research habits saved me. Just the night before, I'd been digging through public records, and guess what I found? Kratzky's brother married Connie's sister back in 2016. So much for impartial enforcement. Finally, he settled on oil stains in my driveway. Environmental hazard, he declared with fake authority. Violates Municipal Code 15.7c. Possible groundwater contamination. I wanted to laugh. These were the same oil stains every mechanic in America has dealt with since Henry Ford started making cars. But instead of arguing, I bit my tongue and documented everything. Back in Iraq, I learned that corrupt officials always overplay their hand. You just have to be patient enough to catch them. Meanwhile, I kept digging into the HOA's recent history. That's when Sarah introduced me to Evelyn Shaw, to her friends, a retired paralegal, sharp as a tack, at 65, silver hair, eyes that missed nothing. Over coffee, at her kitchen table, surrounded by legal book, and folders, she said, "I recognize a pattern when I see one. Your HOA president isn't just power-hungry, she's running a profitable scam." Explained how unpaid HOA fines quickly turn into liens, just like unpaid taxes. Liens can force foreclosure. Most homeowners don't realize how serious those little violation letters can get until it's too late. Together, cross-reference property records with HOA financials. The pattern was crystal clear. Targeted harassment created fines unpaid. Fines became liens. Liens forced foreclosures, and foreclosures created cheap real estate deals. Connie had turned her presidency into a property flipping racket. And here's the kicker. Discovered that Connie's own real estate company was buying up those liens at half price, then using them to push foreclosures and profit from the sales. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was arming herself with the very tools to destroy her. Neighbors' lives. 8 properties in 3 years, told me, sliding a manila folder across the table. All forced sales all through her agency. Same pattern every single time. That night, I was installing a new security camera system in my garage when I heard movement outside. 2 a.m. motion lights snapped on. And there was Tyler, fumbling with my Harley. He'd actually knocked it over, trying to hotwire it with a coat hanger. The sound of that kickstand scraping concrete was like nails on a chalkboard. That motorcycle was my father's legacy, and watching a spoiled teenager treat it like a toy made my blood boil. When the lights caught him, he stammered something about protecting my bike from thieves, like I was supposed to believe he was doing me a favor at 2 in the morning. The damage wasn't massive, just scratches. Maybe $400 in repairs, but the violation felt personal. I could have called the cops right then. Maybe I should have. But instead, I documented everything: photos, video, the work Sand sent him. Home with a warning. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the one you use immediately. It's the one you keep in reserve until the perfect moment. By then, Connie realized I wasn't rolling over like her other victims, so she went. Nuclear, a full-scale smear campaign. Suddenly, rumors spread that I was an unstable veteran with anger issues, supposedly suffering from PTSD, dangerous to children, threat to property values. Neighbors grew cautious, whispering at mailboxes, avoiding eye contact. Connie fueled it with fake concern. I'm just worried about everyone's safety. You understand? She even pushed for new restrictions at HOA meetings rules that would effectively ban motorcycles, claiming multiple noise complaints. Never mind that I never rode before 10 a.m. or after 8 p.m., her performance was flawless. Every gesture, every word carefully staged for maximum drama. She was recording the meetings too, dressed in designer outfits, presenting herself as the noble leader, protecting the community from the outsider. The neighborhood split. Sarah, Dot, and a few others stood by me. But most people, they stayed quiet, afraid of becoming Connie's next target. What they didn't know was that I'd been studying. I dug through our HOA bylaws and cross-checked them against state laws. I found the golden ticket. Connie had been violating her own bylaws for years. New restrictions required a 2/3 majority, yet she'd been passing them with simple votes, which meant her rulings weren't just unfair, they were legally invalid. I didn't reveal it yet. I was saving it for the exact right moment. That chance came when Tyler made his boldest move yet. While I was out visiting my elderly aunt, he decided to break into my garage again, this time with lockpicks he probably learned about on YouTube. Planning to borrow my Harley for a weekend joyride with his girlfriend, but my new security system had other plans. The second he tampered with the lock, a silent alarm triggered. Sarah got the alert, and so did the police. 6 minutes later, officers were on my driveway. They caught Tyler red-handed, surrounded by lock-picking tools. All on camera. His hands shook as they cuffed him, the scattered picks on the floor looking like evidence of premeditation. For the first time, the game had shifted. Connie showed up. At the scene in her BMW, within minutes, clearly already tuned in to police chatter. She tried every excuse imaginable, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, saying Tyler was just checking the property for security reasons, even suggesting maybe I'd left the garage unlocked and he was investigating suspicious activity. The mix of police radio traffic and Connie's desperate explanations created a surreal soundtrack to the slow collapse of her empire in real time. The problem for her was simple. Small-town cops might not be Ivy League, but they know the difference between right and wrong. And clear security footage of a break-in attempt doesn't leave much room for creative storytelling. By the time I returned Sunday evening, the police had already briefed me. The footage showed everything: Tyler deliberately trying to break in, even with YouTube lockpicking tutorials pulled up on his phone. I could have pressed felony charges immediately: breaking and entering, attempted theft of a vehicle, possession of burglary tools. But I chose not to. This was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Pressing charges too soon could tip Connie off to the full scope of evidence I was gathering. Sometimes patience is your most powerful weapon. 3 days later, Walsh knocked on my door with a thick manila folder and a look that meant trouble. 23 years as a paralegal had made her an expert at digging through public records, like an archaeologist uncovering buried treasure. "Tank, you need to see this," she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "It's worse than we thought." What she uncovered chilled me. Using her contacts at the county clerk's office, Dot had pieced together property deeds, HOA financial records, and business filings. The pattern was unmistakable, an elaborate scam disguised as community management. Here's how Connie's scheme worked. She would target a homeowner with endless violations and fines. When the fines went unpaid, and let's be honest, who has thousands to spare for bogus grass height tickets, they became liens on the property. Then her shell company, Community Asset Recovery LLC, would swoop in and buy those liens from the HOA for pennies on the dollar. Think about that. She created the violations, imposed the fines, then bought the debt she manufactured, profiting from both sides of the system. Once she owned the liens, she could initiate foreclosure proceedings, just like unpaid taxes. Under the crushing weight of legal costs, homeowners would panic and sell below market value to escape foreclosure. Guess whose real estate agency handled those distressed sales? And guess who bought them through a web of LLCs, flipping for 30 to 40% profit? 8 properties in 3 years? Dot traced every one. The profits totaled more than $2.3 million, all generated by a system Connie had rigged from the inside. She had turned our HOA into her personal money printer, and most residents didn't even realize they were funding their own downfall. But here's the kicker. Remember my consulting work with the state attorney's office on corruption cases? Their public integrity unit had been investigating patterns just like this. I was literally consulting on fraud while living next door to one of the most organized HOA scams they'd ever seen. And thanks to federal mail fraud laws, those official-looking violation letters Connie loved to send weren't just harassment, they were evidence in a potential federal case. Dot's research also revealed who Connie targeted: elderly residents. On fixed incomes, single parents, veterans, minorities, people less likely to fight back legally. Classic predatory behavior. And she wasn't stopping. She had at least 4 more families in her crosshairs, including me. That's when everything clicked. The selective enforcement, Tyler's fixation on my motorcycle, it wasn't personal. It was business. I was just another property to be harvested. But Connie made one fatal mistake. She targeted someone who spent his days consulting prosecutors on corruption patterns. Someone who knew patience, documentation, and strategy, could dismantle entire criminal networks. The hunter had just become the hunted. The very next morning, called an emergency meeting in my garage. Sarah brought coffee strong enough to jolt. The dead Dot showed up with 3 notepads and a mountain of evidence. I'd already looped in Sarah Aiden, one of the sharpest attorneys I knew. The smell of fresh coffee and motor oil hung in the air as we prepared to bring down a neighborhood tyrant. "We're not just dealing with an HOA president anymore," I told the group, spreading Dot's documents across my workbench. Dismantling a criminal enterprise. Sarah joined via speakerphone, her voice steady and precise. "Based on this evidence," she said, "we're looking at RICO violations. Mail fraud, wire fraud, and housing discrimination. This is federal territory. We built our plan carefully. Multiple pressure points, coordinated timing, maximum legal impact." Sarah would quietly rally other victims, building a coalition of homeowners. Would keep expanding the paper trail. Sarah would draft the civil lawsuit while I coordinated with the state attorney's office. But one final piece was critical media exposure. Dot's neighbor connected us with Janet Kim, an investigative reporter already tracking HOA abuse stories. When I first spoke to Janet, her energy was contagious. "Been waiting for a case like this," she said. "A clear trail, systemic fraud, sympathetic victims. This could change HOA law statewide." Meanwhile, I filed Freedom of Information Act requests, meeting minutes, complaint records, property transfers, even city employment records. Public records leave a trail, and corruption hates exposure. Then came Rico Santos, my old Marine buddy. turned private security pro. He showed up with surveillance gear fit for a movie. We legally set up cameras and long-range microphones around Connie's favorite restaurant, where she held her secret meetings. Everything we did was above-board public property. It's commercially available tools, fully within the law. The real turning point came from Tyler's girlfriend. It's Madison Creek. Turns out Tyler had been bragging to her about his mom's business. Genius, explaining the entire scam like it was something to admire. Madison, who had more conscience than her boyfriend, secretly recorded everything. When she nervously played those recordings in my garage, it was like listening to a confession. Tyler described how his mother targeted people, manufactured violations, leaned on code enforcement, and pressured families into selling. Even called his attempted break-in recon for future harassment. When Sarah heard the recordings, her reaction was clear. This is a conspiracy to commit fraud with intent. To deprive homeowners of their rights, federal prosecutors will eat this alive. Now, we had everything. Community support, airtight evidence, media allies, surveillance, and even direct admissions from Connie's inner circle. All that remained was timing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Connie still had no idea what was coming. I'd stopped paying her fake fines, stopped answering her violation notices, and kept showing up to HOA meetings calm and smiling like a man holding a winning hand. Desperate people make desperate moves. And Connie Thornfield was about to prove that truth in spectacular fashion. What about zoning issues? We need him gone before he figures out the full scope of our operation. The sabotage attempt happened on a Monday night. I was sitting in the living room watching the evening news when Rico's surveillance system pinged my phone with alerts. Motion detected in the garage heat signatures moving around my motorcycle. I opened the live feed, and there he was, Tyler Thornfield, crouched next to my Harley with a wrench set. He wasn't just tinkering, he was systematically loosening the brake cables, adjusting them to fail slowly over time. The kid had done his research, probably from the same online channels that taught him lockpicking. He wasn't trying to end. My life just caused an accident bad enough to scare me into cooperating with the HOA, but the metallic scrape of those cables against the frame made my skin crawl. I let him finish. Sometimes the best evidence comes from letting someone expose themselves fully on camera. By the time Tyler slipped out of my garage, I had 47 minutes of high-definition footage, clear proof of deliberate mechanical sabotage, a felony under Texas law. The next morning, during my routine maintenance check, I spotted the tampering immediately. 20 years working on military vehicles teaches you to recognize sabotage at a glance. I photographed everything before making repairs and called Detective Morrison at the sheriff's department. The fingerprint team found Tyler's prints all over the brake assembly. This wasn't teenage mischief anymore. Combined with his earlier break-in attempt, it showed escalating criminal behavior that could have ended in disaster. More importantly, it revealed a clear pattern of conspiracy between Connie and her son targeting me directly. Connie's reaction to the investigation was panic, disguised as righteous indignation. That very afternoon, she marched over to Sarah's house, smiling sweetly while slipping in veiled threats. Sarah, sharp as ever, recorded the entire exchange on her phone. The audio was damning. Connie suggested that single mothers should be careful who they associate with, or community support might disappear. That alone was enough to build a witness intimidation charge. When Sarah later played me the recording, her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. She said, "I've dealt with bullies before in the hospital. They always overplay their hand. When they're scared." Meanwhile, Connie was working behind the scenes, pressuring the HOA board to approve special assessments against residents who didn't fall in line. It was essentially a financial weapon and emergency tax disguised as community improvement fees. Her plan was to saddle Sarah and me with thousands in bogus charges to silence her critics. But in her desperation, Connie made a critical mistake. She reached out to Tommy Williams, the editor of our local newspaper and her longtime poker buddy. She asked him to run a story portraying me as an unstable veteran threatening neighborhood harmony. What she didn't know was that Tommy's nephew had served in the same Marine unit as me. Instead of running Connie's propaganda, Tommy called me directly to verify the story. That phone call opened his eyes. He started digging into Connie's operations on his own, turning her failed manipulation into another source of evidence. Against her, the bribery attempt came that Friday. Connie showed up at my door with a bottle of wine and her most sincere smile. She suggested we work things out like civilized neighbors. Then she laid out her offer. She'd drop all my HOA fines and restrictions if I agreed to cooperate in as a sweetener. She hinted at giving me contractor preference for all HOA maintenance work, thousands in potential income in exchange for silence. Classic quid pro quo bribery. She framed it as though she was doing me a favor. My palms were sweating as I gripped the small recording device in my pocket. But I kept my voice calm and curious. That sounds reasonable, Connie. Tell me more about how this contractor arrangement would work. 37 minutes later, I had crystal clear audio of her explaining, in detail, how she ran her corruption scheme. The final piece of the puzzle came from Tyler himself. Facing felony charges and real consequences, his lawyer advised him to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Under pressure, Tyler broke. He revealed everything: his crimes, his mother's direct orders, and even her written playbook. Yes, a literal playbook. Document mapping out her entire property takeover strategy, timelines, target profiles, coordination with her ally Jim Kratzky, and the kicker. Tyler had been saving recordings of his phone calls with Connie as instructions. Those recordings became a goldmine and evidence trail prosecutors dream of. The trap was finally set. Every piece was in place. All we needed now was the right moment to spring it. But Connie, like any cornered predator, wasn't going down quietly. She launched her nuclear option, a full-scale character assassination campaign. It started with whispers at the mailbox, rumors of my erratic behavior and late-night activities. Then came direct accusations that I had threatened her and Tyler, that my military service left me unstable, that I was dangerous to the community. She painted herself as a terrified single mother protecting her son from a violent veteran who couldn't handle civilian life. Her masterpiece move was attempting to weaponize the media. She contacted Rick Martinez, a columnist at the Tribune-Herald, feeding him a carefully crafted story about PTSD dangers and property value risks. She even included fabricated quotes about me supposedly threatening children in the neighborhood. But Connie underestimated Rick. He did his homework. He called the sheriff's department. He interviewed Sarah and Dot. He even spoke with my former Marine unit commander. When nothing in her story checked out, Rick smelled a bigger scandal and started investigating Connie herself. At the next HOA meeting, Connie's trembling hands betrayed her. For the first time in years, she no longer controlled the narrative, and everyone in the room knew it. Her final legal gambit was filing a restraining order against me, claiming I had stalked and threatened her. The sworn affidavit was a masterpiece of creative fiction. Alleged incidents of me following her car, intimidating her at the grocery store, even making threatening gestures while she walked her dog. One problem: Rico's surveillance system had been logging my movements for weeks as part of our evidence collection. Every incident she described was impossible because I was somewhere else with time-stamped proof. Her affidavit wasn't just false. It was perjury, caught on camera. The hearing was unforgettable. Sarah Aiden walked into the courtroom armed with GPS data and video evidence. She showed the judge, point by point, that I was miles away during every alleged incident. The judge's face hardened. "Mrs. Thornfield," he said, his voice heavy with authority, "perjury in a sworn affidavit is a felony. I am dismissing this restraining order and referring your statements to the district attorney." So the real breakthrough came shortly after. Rico's parabolic microphones captured crystal clear audio of Connie during one of her weekly lunch meetings. On tape, she plotted my harassment with Councilman Rick Pettin and her fixer, Jim Kratzky. Her voice carried through the restaurant window. "The tank problem needs to be dealt with before he causes real damage. Jim, can you dig up building code violations? Rick, can you apply some pressure?" That was at the smoking gun. Pettin's response was chilling. "Property acquisition is just business," he said. "But we can't let one troublemaker unravel the entire system. Maybe it's time for more serious pressure. Those words changed everything. Federal investigators immediately recognized the implications. Under RICO law, you need proof of an ongoing criminal conspiracy, and we had just captured it on tape. When I played the recording for my state attorney contact, his reaction was instant. We move now. At the same time, Janet Kim's undercover investigation was reaching its peak. Her hidden camera had caught Connie trying to bribe Jim Katsky with playoff tickets to speed up code enforcement against me and Sarah. That footage was enough to make prosecutors celebrate. Community pressure was mounting too. 23 homeowners signed a petition backing me and describing their own harassment. 3 families came forward with proof they had lost their homes under Connie's same predatory tactics. The neighborhood was finally waking up, and then came the final piece. Tyler, her own son. His juvenile plea deal required full disclosure, and he delivered everything: recorded phone calls, text threads, even handwritten notes with his mother's instructions. Watching a child forced into betrayal was heartbreaking but also undeniable. Connie had turned her own son into an accomplice. His attorney had explained the choice clearly: help the investigation or face adult felony charges. He chose survival. I couldn't blame him. By now, everything was converging toward one explosive moment. Sarah Aiden filed the civil lawsuit. Federal prosecutors finalized the RICO charges. Janet Kim's expose was set to air that evening, and the HOA called an emergency meeting that promised to change everything. The Willowbrook Community Center had never seen anything like it. What began as a routine HOA meeting became the neighborhood equivalent of the Super Bowl. All 150 seats filled, another 50 standing along the walls, dozens recording on their phones. The energy was electric. Half the crowd came to defend Connie. Half came to watch her fall. Janet Kim's crew set up in the back. Detective Morrison and 2 federal agents sat quietly by the exit, looking like they were just waiting for graduation to start, not multiple felony arrests. At exactly 7 p.m., Connie walked to the podium, dressed in an expensive navy blazer that probably cost more than most people's HOA dues. She had rehearsed for this moment, opening with Oscar-worthy victimhood. "Friends and neighbors," she began, her voice shaking with fake emotion. "I stand before you tonight as a single mother, terrorized by a dangerous man in our community." She gestured toward me in the 3rd row, painting herself as the hero and me as the villain. She described threats that never happened, harassment that lived only in her imagination, and called my motorcycle maintenance dangerous behavior. Her supporters clapped on cue as if the whole thing had been choreographed for the cameras. When she finished, I walked calmly to the podium, carrying only a manila folder. "No theatrics, just facts. Mrs. Thornfield has told you a story," I said, connecting my laptop to the projector. "Now let me show you the truth." The first slide displayed a timeline of harassment. Every violation, every fine, every selective enforcement. The room murmured. Next came financial records. Connie's scheme laid bare with property acquisitions, sale prices, and commissions. Photos of displaced families filled the screen. Mrs. Thornfield created violations, imposed fines, bought the liens cheap, and then profited from forced foreclosures, I explained. The crowd erupted, voices rising with anger as they realized what had been happening. Then came the bombshell: audio recordings of Connie's own meetings with Jim Katsky and Councilman Pettin. Her voice filled the room. "Property acquisition is good business. These people don't deserve to live here if they can't follow simple rules." Her face drained of color. She tried to shout that the evidence was fake, but I kept advancing. It's a video of Tyler breaking in under her orders. Audio of her coaching him on harassment tactics. Bank records tracing money between shell companies and the HOA. That's when Detective Morrison stepped forward. His footsteps echoed in the silent room. "Mrs. Thornfield," he said firmly, "you're under arrest for RICO violations. Mail fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and perjury." The metallic click of handcuffs rang louder than anything else. Phones flashed as the moment was captured. Forever. At the same time, Federal agents arrested Jim Katsky and Rick Patton, both arrogant enough to attend the meeting, still believing they were untouchable. Connie screamed, "This is a mistake. I'm the victim. He's the criminal." But no one believed her. The evidence was overwhelming. The room erupted in cheers. Victims of her harassment stood and applauded. Families wept as years of pain turned into justice. Even Tyler, standing in the back with his attorney, looked crushed but relieved. With trembling hands, he read a short statement apologizing for his role and admitting that his mother had forced him into it. Janet Kim's cameras captured all the arrests. Evidence, the cheers, the tears. Within hours, the footage went viral. Our neighborhood's nightmare became a national story about standing up to corruption. As they led Connie away, she shouted one last desperate line, "This isn't over. This community needs me." But it was over. 4 years of fear ended with the click of handcuffs and the roar of neighbors finally free. Resolution and epilogue. The transformation of Willowbrook Estates happened faster than anyone imagined. Within a week, the entire HOA board resigned in disgrace. Emergency elections brought Sarah Blake in as president and Walsh as treasurer. Their first act, refunding $180,000 in illegitimate fines to homeowners' money stolen through years of harassment. Now rightfully returned, the new board rewrote bylaws from the ground up, replacing secrecy with transparency and shifting power back to residents. Within 6 months, property values climbed 8% as word spread of the neighborhood's rebirth from HOA nightmare to a model of community leadership. For me, victory wasn't just legal, it was personal. Rebuilding my Harley alongside Tyler as part of his community service became an unexpected path to healing. The smell of oil, the clink of tools, the steady heam of the rebuilt engine, it all felt different now. Not a symbol of conflict, but of freedom and new beginnings. And when my elderly aunt moved into Willowbrook half a year later, she didn't just see a house. She saw a community, one that had faced corruption, fought back, and come out stronger. Together, drawn by the warmth and unity that came from our victory over corruption, the legal aftermath was swift and undeniable. Connie was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to RICO violations, mail fraud, and conspiracy. Jim Kratzky received 2 years, while City Council member Rick Patton faced his own corruption trials at the municipal level. The civil RICO lawsuit brought a $2.8 million judgment money that restored victims and funded long overdue community improvements. One of the most powerful outcomes was Tyler's redemption. His 200 hours of community service were spent working. Beside me repairing motorcycles and teaching neighborhood safety, the same kid who once tried to steal my bike became my apprentice, learning skills and earning back trust. His transformation was proof that even broken paths can lead to brighter futures. Our fight didn't just stay local. It became a nationwide example of how to challenge HOA corruption. The case inspired new Texas legislation requiring homeowner associations to be financially transparent, and soon, communities from 12 other states reached out for guidance. What began as defending one motorcycle turned into a larger movement for community justice. With settlement funds, we launched a healing project that would leave a lasting legacy. The Willowbrook Veterans Memorial Garden led its design and construction, turning a place once marked by division into a space of unity. Tyler organized teen volunteers, neighbors pitched in, and together we built something meaningful.
Right.
Sarah and I also discovered that fighting side by side created more than just trust. It grew into love. Now, we're planning a spring wedding in that very garden, surrounded by neighbors who've become our chosen family. The memorial even includes dedicated motorcycle parking for veterans, transforming my Harley from a symbol of conflict into one of pride. At the opening ceremony, more than 300 people came, including families who had once lost their homes to Connie's schemes, but had now returned to a renewed neighborhood. And through it all, one lesson stood out above the rest: documentation. Community organizing and basic legal knowledge can take down any corrupt system. HOA bullies thrive on fear and isolation.
Ow.
They crumble when neighbors unite with evidence and determination. Remember these three strategies. First, document everything. Photos, recordings, and written notes are your shield. Second, don't fight alone. Build alliances with your neighbors. Third, know your rights. Learn the HOA laws and state regulations that protect you. Knowledge is your strongest weapon, Tyler. Now 17 and truly reformed, summed it up best during his high school graduation speech. My mom taught me that power means controlling others. Tank taught me that real power means serving your community. The ripple effects of our fight keep spreading. Law schools now study our case. Janet Kim's investigation earned regional awards. Sarah Aiden, our attorney, has dedicated her practice to exposing HOA corruption full-time. We proved that ordinary people can bring down officials who thought they were untouchable, but the work isn't finished. Just last week, I received a call from Maria Santos in the next county. She's battling a similar HOA scheme, this time tied to solar panel permits and code manipulation. The same corruption playbook, just a different stage. Looks like our Justice League has another mission. So that story, though, that's for another day. And trust me, it's even more shocking than what you've just heard. So now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment with your worst HOA nightmare. You're not alone in this fight. Together, we can take down any corrupt system. If today's story inspired you, hit that subscribe button and join the HOA Stories family. Smash that like button if watching justice unfold made your day, and share your thoughts below. It's more outrageous. Neighborhood showdowns are just around the corner, so stay tuned.